Well, absolutely, but don't even believe that there were five options. What you really saw were Harry's and Meghan's fantasy narrative, which they call the truth.
It's almost like Harry 2.0 is Brooklyn Beckham. Have you seen any of this action where...
Yes, I'm into it.
I'm so
very
into it because he doesn't talk to his father, fall out with the father.
Meghan, who he says, she's absolute misery, but, that's not true either. And she wasn't around in the late 1990s. I mean, it's a sort of extraordinary way of behaving.
Devastating moment for Prince Harry's reputation and credibility, as he argues with a judge while in the dock, contradicts himself, appears to fib about using the pseudonym Mr. Mischief.
The more Meghan must have been convinced of her importance to the monarchy. Do you still think she's that delusional? And maybe the answer is watching her at Kevin Costner's 805 Live event in $300,000 worth of jewelry, including Diana's Cartier watch.
Wherever she is, whether it's at Costner or in Colombia or in Nigeria or wherever, she's always, her publicist will reveal that she's wearing one of Diana's pieces of jewelry. He wanted half in, half out. He wanted his own cake and eat it. And the royal family said, no, you're either in the royal family or not in the royal family.
There are takedowns, and then there are moments where someone walks into the room, flips on the lights, and suddenly the whole set looks like cardboard. That's what Tom Bower just did to Meghan Markle's Netflix era, at the worst possible moment. Because while Prince Harry is in a London courtroom, tense and emotional, Netflix is making a separate decision that doesn't involve sympathy, legacy, or titles. It involves performance. And the story being pushed is simple. Meghan's cooking show didn't get cut because of a bad week or a few cranky reviews. It got cut because the premise couldn't hold. The pitch wasn't strong enough to survive the audience. And if that sounds harsh, that's exactly why it works as a narrative. Harsh feels decisive. Harsh feels like the truth. And Bower's comments aren't delivered like gossip. They're delivered like a case file finally being opened in public. Because here's the real hook. This isn't framed as a surprise failure. It's framed as an inevitable exposure. Bower, whether you agree with him or not, speaks like someone who has been building a dossier. The message is that he didn't just watch a show and shrug. He dug for patterns, talked to people who were close to the process, and now he's presenting conclusions the way a prosecutor does. Calmly, confidently, like he has receipts even when you can't see them on screen. The effect on the audience is powerful. It invites you to stop asking, did she get unlucky? And start asking, was this always going to happen? That framing changes everything. Because once failure becomes predictable, it stops feeling like a setback and starts feeling like a reveal. Now look at the Netflix angle, because this is where the story turns cold. The claim being made is that executives realized early that the deal wasn't producing what they paid for. The original promise wasn't a nice little lifestyle series. The promise was impact, attention, cultural gravity, the kind of output that justifies a massive price tag and turns headlines into subscriptions. Instead, the alleged reality check was brutal. The content wasn't landing, and it wasn't landing in a way money couldn't fix. It wasn't a marketing problem. It wasn't a give it time problem. It was a demand problem, and that's the nightmare scenario in streaming. Because streaming platforms don't reward potential. They reward momentum. Either the audience shows up, or the algorithm buries you alive. With Love, Meghan was supposed to be the rebrand moment, the proof that she could step into the lifestyle lane and own it. The pitch is easy to imagine because it's a classic formula. Warm, aspirational, cozy, home and heart, with enough polish to feel elevated, Martha adjacent without being a copy, familiar enough to be comforting, glossy enough to be premium. But the way Bower frames it, the execution didn't feel comforting. It felt controlled. It didn't feel intimate. It felt staged. And that's not a small criticism in lifestyle content. It's fatal. Because lifestyle shows don't succeed because the food is edible. They succeed because the audience buys the person. They succeed because viewers feel like they're being invited into a real space with a real voice, not guided through a performance. And here's the issue the script keeps circling. Authenticity isn't optional anymore. In 2026, audiences have seen too many curated personas, too many carefully edited real moments, too many brand-safe vulnerabilities. Viewers can sniff out performance faster than ever. If the warmth feels rehearsed, if the spontaneity looks planned, if the relatable moments feel engineered, people don't rage watch. They don't write essays. They simply click away. And when they click away, the show doesn't just underperform. It becomes impossible to defend. That's why the story is framed as collapse, not disappointment. Disappointment implies the audience stayed long enough to care. Collapse implies the audience didn't even form a relationship with it. Then Bauer's critique sharpens. It isn't just one show that didn't land. It's the entire approach. The idea that the brand can be built on my story without a strong point of view underneath. Because if the substance is thin, the styling starts to look like camouflage. And cameras are cruel that way. Eventually, they reveal what presentation tries to hide. This is where the transcript makes a bigger claim. The camera captures emptiness. Not because emptiness is dramatic, but because it's obvious when someone is trying too hard to control what you see. And from there, the argument moves to contradiction, the kind that turns a brand into a target. The home and family image sounds safe. It sounds universally appealing. It's one of the oldest, most reliable lanes in lifestyle media: warmth, comfort, loyalty, love. But the script points to an alleged real-life detail that, fair or unfair, hits that image like a hammer. While the wholesome project was filming, her father reportedly experienced a major medical crisis, and she didn't show up. You can argue about private family dynamics all day, but audiences don't process this like a court case. They process it like a story. And in story terms, this is devastating. Because if you're selling comfort and loyalty as a public identity, and the public believes your personal choices contradict it, the audience doesn't just doubt you, they feel manipulated. That's why the word hypocrisy keeps surfacing, not just as an insult, but as the central narrative problem. The public message and the private behavior don't match, and the gap is getting harder to ignore. Now zoom out again, because the coldest part of this is the metric. Numbers. In the transcript, the performance is described as grim. So low, the show didn't just underwhelm. It effectively disappeared inside Netflix's ocean of content. And once you're invisible on a platform like that, the story changes instantly. It stops being a comeback. It becomes a flop nobody noticed. Then comes the comparison trap, and it's merciless. 2 million views over months becomes a punchline because the internet immediately supplies contrast. Smaller creators, no celebrity oxygen, no massive budget, no global platform, pulling bigger audiences routinely. That's why the question becomes unavoidable. If fame and money can't buy attention, what's left? And that question is the heart of the humiliation being built. Because this wasn't a niche documentary meant to be challenging. It wasn't an experimental art piece. It was a cooking show, one of the easiest formats to make work if the audience wants to like you. The gut punch is that someone who once had the world watching, who secured a massive deal, still couldn't generate must-watch interest for a simple, accessible format. That's not just failure. That's the collapse of the claim that star power is enough. Even the better performing project is framed as embarrassing, because better still isn't good. And in the streaming world, not good is a death sentence. Platforms don't hold space for ego. They hold space for watch time. Then motive comes into focus, and it makes the whole Netflix story feel even more cynical. The argument is that Netflix didn't sign them for gentle lifestyle programming. They signed them hoping for a jackpot, royal access, explosive revelations, the kind of content that detonates across the globe. Diana mythology, divorce speculation, insider narratives, the taboo material people can't stop watching. Instead, what they allegedly got was safe, staged, and small. And if that's true, the mismatch isn't just disappointing. It's commercially insulting. It's like paying for fireworks and getting sparklers. That's why the transcript leans so hard on the idea that the platform gave her every advantage: resources, producers, money, control, creative authority. If the support is maxed out and the result is still flat, the conclusion becomes hard to dodge. The machine isn't the problem. The product is. Then the critique goes for the jugular. Her on-camera presence isn't described as accidentally boring. It's described as calculated boring, controlled, stiff, no accidental warmth, no looseness, no spontaneous charm that breaks through the planning. Everything reads rehearsed, and the moment an audience can see the stitching, the illusion dies. From there, the transcript shifts into a psychological explanation, control and ego. The claim is that she can't connect because everything is filtered through image management. And whether or not you accept that, the logic is clean. Relatability can't be manufactured. You can't art direct sincerity. Lifestyle success has one simple rule. People believe you. They may envy you, disagree with you, mock you, but they feel you're real. Once that belief is gone, no amount of aesthetics can replace it. So the core accusation becomes, she isn't presenting herself, she's playing herself. And modern audiences, armed with clips and commentary and instant group judgment, don't just notice that. They punish it with indifference. Then comes the behind-the-scenes implication, chaos. Repeated takes, perfection obsession, constant reshoots, not to improve the content, but to control the image. And that's a key distinction. Because viewers can feel when the priority is look perfect instead of be good. One detail captures the whole critique, insisting on flawless presentation while doing something that should look lived in. Real cooking is messy. Real hosting includes awkward beats. Real people drop things, laugh at the wrong time, recover, keep going. That's what makes it human. But if everything stays magazine ready, the viewer stops believing they're watching a person. They start seeing a performance. And that's the irony. The show wasn't built to feel like real life. It was built to resemble a cover shoot. The problem is, covers don't build loyalty. People do. So when the show fails, the explanation in this narrative is blunt. Viewers didn't feel anything real. And without that, the concept collapses. Because lifestyle content is basically trust, recorded. Now layer on the staging accusations. Rented spaces, manufactured cozy details, celebrity cameos that feel obligated. If the world you're selling looks like a set, the audience stops relaxing into the story and starts auditing it. They stop watching for comfort and start watching for deception. And then comes the reaction. Because reaction is where reputations get cemented. The cancellation isn't framed as a humbling lesson. It's framed as outrage, like she expected acclaim, like she expected awards. And that gap between self-perception and public reception is where the narrative turns from unlucky to delusional. So we're left with the verdict the script keeps building toward. The show is canceled, the audience didn't care, and the big lifestyle coronation never happened. She believed this project would crown her as a powerhouse in the space. Instead, it became proof that glossy packaging can't rescue empty content. And while Netflix is pulling the plug on one front, Harry is unraveling on another, humiliating himself in court in a way that mirrors the same pattern: emotion, grievance, spectacle. The argument being built is that the chaos isn't random, it's the brand. Here's the courtroom sequence that changes the tone. Harry doesn't just testify, he argues, repeatedly, enough that the judge has to step in and tell him, essentially, to stop performing and start answering. And when that happens, what should look like a serious legal case starts looking like a public meltdown. Put it in perspective. A high court judge, someone who has seen every kind of litigant, has to repeatedly correct a prince on basic courtroom conduct. That's not just bad optics. That's credibility leaking out in real time. Then the moment goes fully emotional. Harry breaks down and says they made his wife's life an absolute misery. It's dramatic, and it also raises a question the narrative wants you to sit with. Is this testimony, or is this the same script he can't stop returning to? Because here's the glaring issue the transcript points out. This case is about events that happened before Meghan. So when Harry centers her anyway, it starts to look less like evidence and more like compulsion, like he can't separate his legal argument from his emotional storyline. And that's where the broader pattern gets applied. Harry keeps looping back to Meghan even when it doesn't logically fit. The implication is dependency, that he isn't driving his own narrative anymore. He's repeating the same grievance framework on reflex. Then the detail that sharpens the contrast. Meghan isn't even there. While he's in court, falling apart publicly, she stays back. And whether that's fair or not, the image contrast is powerful. One person looks like he's sacrificing himself in public. The other looks like she's maintaining distance. The script doesn't even need to say more. The audience supplies its own conclusion. So the punchline writes itself. Harry cries in court over Meghan, while the story suggests she's elsewhere, keeping the lifestyle image alive. Again, fair or unfair. That juxtaposition fuels the exact perception problem they can't shake. One person performing sacrifice, the other performing lifestyle. And then the moral lands. You can't always get what you want. Not in court, not on streaming, not in public opinion. The world doesn't bend just because you're emotional about it. Finally, the privacy argument collapses under its own contradictions. Harry complains that the media commercialized his life, yet he's already monetized it himself in extreme detail. And once that's true, leave me alone stops sounding like a principle and starts sounding like a tactic. And that's where this entire narrative ends up. Not with sympathy, not with triumph, not with a comeback, but with the same accusation applied to everything: performance, control, curated emotion, and an audience that simply doesn't want to buy it anymore.